Today, we're getting into something I think a lot of us can relate to on some level. The idea of the black sheep.
Mm-hmm.
That term often comes with this heavy kind of negative feeling,
Yeah.
right? Being different, misunderstood, maybe the outsider in the family or at work or wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's really fascinating and what we want to unpack today is the paradox there. That very term, usually linked with, pain or isolation,
Yeah.
our sources suggest it can actually be a huge source of power. Real strength, unique insights, even transformative gifts can come from it. It's about finding what's hidden in that otherness.
Okay, I like that reframing. So that's our mission for this deep dive then.
Right.
We're going to peel back the layers on the black sheep,
Yeah.
understand like the real definition,
Right.
then explore those surprising positive signs you mentioned, and really pull out the lessons we can all learn from people who walk their own path. And we've got a great example story later to really bring it home.
Yep, we've looked at this from a few angles, some business insights, psychological takes, and some really powerful personal stories too.
Great. So, okay, let's start right at the beginning. This term, black sheep, where did it actually come from? It's got a literal origin, hasn't it?
It really does, yeah. Historically, a black sheep was just that a sheep born with black wool. It's a recessive gene thing.
Okay.
And back then, in farming, white wool was the valuable stuff because you could dye it any color.
Ah, right. Easier to work with.
Exactly. So black wool was often seen as, well, less valuable, sometimes just useless. So right from the start, these sheep literally stood out from the flock. They were visibly different.
And that literal difference, okay, that then sort of morphed into the social label we use now.
Precisely, yeah. By the 18th century or so, it became an idiom, code for someone who was maybe wayward, the odd one out, the outcast, someone who just didn't follow the expected path.
Hmm.
What's kind of funny, though, is the actual sheep. They're not breaking sheep rules or anything. They just look different.
Right. Good point.
But we humans, we tend to label anything that deviates, don't we?
We really do. So, moving beyond the farm then, what does it mean psychologically? Like in a family or group, what's happening when someone gets labeled the black sheep?
Yeah, that's a really important question from a psychology perspective, especially if you look at something like family systems theory.
Okay.
The black sheep often takes on the role of the identified patient.
Identified patient, what's that?
It means the family or the group, maybe unconsciously, projects its own stuff, its pain, its dysfunction, its unresolved issues onto that one person.
Oh, wow.
And that person then sort of holds all that emotional energy. They might act out or show symptoms, which lets everyone else kind of point and say, see, there's the problem. It's them, not us.
So it's like a deflection mechanism for the group.
It can be, yeah. A protective function for a system that's maybe not very healthy itself.
So basically being used as a kind of scapegoat.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. And it also really connects with those classic archetypes you see everywhere, in myths, fairy tales,
Like what?
like the orphan or the abandoned child. That core feeling of being misunderstood, rejected, feeling like you don't belong, you're misplaced somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's really obvious or more subtle, that feeling of being the odd one out is, well, it's pretty central.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really fascinating. Because despite all that initial pain, feeling like an outsider,
Yeah.
our sources are saying there are incredible gifts that come from this. It's not just downside.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is how the challenge itself, the struggle of being the black sheep, often forces people to develop really unique strengths they might not have found otherwise.
Right.
It can actually become this engine for profound self-discovery.
Okay, so what's one of the big ones? One major gift our sources talk about is unconventional thinking. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they've often operated outside the main system or felt like they don't quite fit the mold.
Right.
They're just not as bound by the standard rules and assumptions that limit other people. They see things differently.
How so?
Well, they might connect ideas that seem totally unrelated to others. They question things everyone else takes for granted. They can genuinely imagine possibilities where others just see, roadblocks.
So it's not just being contrary, it's actually seeing without those conventional blinders.
Precisely. It's thinking without the mental handcuffs of conformity, if you like. And that kind of thinking, sure, initially it might not be recognized, maybe even resisted.
Yeah.
Because newness feels risky, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But that's exactly the kind of thinking that leads to massive change, to innovation.
So it boils down to this instinct to not just accept the default setting in how you think or what you do.
Exactly that. There was this interesting study on customer service reps.
Oh, yeah.
It found that the employees who actually took the initiative to download a different web browser like Chrome or Firefox, instead of just using the pre-installed Internet Explorer or Safari, those employees consistently outperformed the others, and they stayed in their jobs significantly longer, too.
Really? Just from downloading a browser?
Well, it wasn't about the browser itself, Chris. It wasn't technical skill. It was about the underlying impulse, the instinct to ask, hang on, is there a different way? Is there a better option here? That's the black sheep spirit right there.
Huh. That's a great little example. So it's really driven by a desire for, what? Impact, independence,
Yeah.
not just rebellion for its own sake.
That's absolutely right. You look at successful originals, entrepreneurs, innovators, they aren't necessarily more risk-taking overall. It's often not this craving for risk that drives them.
What is it then?
It's more this desire to say, can I follow this passion? Can I work my own way? Can I do something that's really going to make a difference? They actually manage what one source called risk portfolios.
Risk portfolios, like in finance.
Sort of. It means they might make a really bold, risky move in one area, their core innovation, maybe, but they balance it out with being quite cautious and conventional in other parts of their life or business.
Oh, okay. So they're not betting the farm on everything.
Exactly. They offset the risk. It's strategic.
So it sounds like really leaning into that uniqueness, embracing it, it actually helps people find this deeper inner strength, confidence, and lets them build a life that's actually fulfilling for them instead of just trying to fit into someone else's box.
That's a perfect summary. Yeah.
Okay, so the journey of the black sheep, it clearly offers some powerful lessons, not just for people who identify that way, but really for anyone aiming for, personal growth or originality. So if someone listening wants to embrace their own unique path more, what are some key takeaways from the sources?
Well, one really fundamental lesson is about the importance of cultivating your inner world.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
When you've experienced that feeling of isolation or not quite fitting in, ironically, it can create this space, this breathing room, as one source put it, breathing room to really access the deeper parts of yourself, the parts that might get drowned out by all the external noise if you were conforming more.
Right. Less pressure to fit in means more space to figure out who you actually are.
Exactly. And that process helps you start to see your unique perspective not as a problem or a source of pain, but as a genuine gift, something valuable.
And once you've done that internal work, recognize that gift.
Yeah.
The next step is often about sharing it, right? Finding the courage to speak up.
Yes, absolutely. Learning to use your voice is critical, even if it feels, really scary.
Yeah.
Our sources suggest that for people with these unique perspectives, there's almost this spiritual path involved in connecting that perspective to the world, getting it out there.
Okay.
And that often means, challenging yourself, trying to articulate your ideas clearly so that other people can connect with them, even if the ideas are unconventional.
But it's not about getting everyone to understand or agree, is it? It sounds more like finding your people, your wolf pack, as they say. How important are those allies?
Oh, incredibly important, crucial. As the research highlights, we all need allies. And it doesn't have to be a huge crowd.
Right.
The data shows that even having a single ally, a single friend, just one person who gets it, is often enough to make you feel like you're not alone in it. It's really about finding that very, very small group of people who believe in you. Quality over quantity.
Okay, so cultivate the inner world, find your voice, find your allies. What about bringing ideas into the world? There was a counterintuitive point about not trusting ourselves to judge our own ideas. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? The thing is, when it comes to evaluating our own creative ideas, we're generally, you're terrible at it.
Really, what?
We tend to be either wildly over-optimistic because we're attached to it, or sometimes overly critical. And managers, they're not always much better. They often judge new ideas against what already exists, the prototypes. So they can be too negative towards anything really different.
So who is good at judging new ideas?
Our peers. Fellow creators, people who are also in the trenches trying to make new things. They tend to be much more open to something unusual because they understand the creative struggle. But importantly, they're also willing to be honest and say, you know what, this one's really bad if it is. They give better feedback.
That makes sense. It reminds me of those examples you hear about, like the Segway versus, say, Seinfeld.
Exactly. The Segway inventor was apparently super overconfident in his idea, didn't really test if people actually wanted this thing.
Right. Total flop, ultimately.
Whereas the Seinfeld pilot, it tested terribly. It was rated weak, almost got canceled right away.
No way.
Yeah. But one executive, Rick Ludwin, he kind of stepped outside the usual metrics, saw the potential despite the weirdness, and he championed it. He funded a few more episodes out of his own budget, basically.
Wow. And the rest is history.
A critical insight, right? And it connects to another key idea. Quantity is very closely related to quality when it comes to creative work.
Okay, unpack that. Sounds paradoxical.
Well, we tend to think we should just focus on perfecting one brilliant idea, but the data actually shows something different. One of the best predictors of how much creative productivity you will ultimately achieve is about the number of ideas you produce. Volume predicts quality, eventually.
So you need to generate a lot of stuff, even if most of it isn't great, to get to the really good stuff.
Precisely. Think of Edison. People remember the light bulb, but he had over 100 failed ideas, maybe more, before he perfected it. You need the attempts, you need the bad ideas to find the great ones.
So embrace the process, warts and all.
Exactly. And this even relates to something called strategic procrastination.
Strategic procrastination. Sounds like an excuse I'd use.
Huh. Maybe, but there's something to it. Deliberately delaying starting a task, just slightly, can actually lead to more creative ideas.
Yeah.
Because it gives your mind time to incubate, to wander. You access more diverse ideas than if you just jumped on the first, most obvious solution. Our first ideas are often the most conventional ones. A little delay lets the less obvious ones surface.
Interesting. Okay, one more challenge. Speaking truth to power. Sharing unpopular ideas, especially when you're already maybe seen as the outlier, that feels really risky.
It absolutely can be, but there are strategies. There's this one entrepreneur, Rufus Griscom, founder of Babbel.
Don't know him.
He raised over $3 million and eventually sold his company to Disney for $40 million. And his pitching technique was wild.
How so?
He would apparently start his pitches by listing all the reasons you should not back my company or reasons why you should not buy it.
Seriously. That sounds like suicide.
Right. But it worked. By acknowledging the weaknesses up front, he came across as incredibly self-critical and honest. It actually made investors more confident that he understood the challenges and could overcome them. It was disarming.
Wow, that takes guts.
And related to that, there's another paradox. If you have an unpopular idea, seeking advice from a disagreeable boss, someone known for being critical and skeptical, can actually be more helpful.
Why on earth?
Because they're less concerned about maintaining harmony, they're more willing to rock the boat. They'll give you the blunt, unfiltered feedback you probably need for a truly unconventional idea, rather than just polite encouragement.
Okay, that makes a strange kind of sense. So ultimately embracing this whole black sheep thing, it really seems to come back to deep self-acceptance, doesn't it? Authenticity.
That really is the core of it, yes. As one source puts it beautifully, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. For someone on the black sheep path, that kind of radical self-belief isn't just a nice to have, it's almost like a survival tool. When the world's telling you you're wrong or different, that inner conviction is your compass.
Yeah.
And that leads to self-acceptance, to confidence. It lets you trust your instincts and follow your own path, even when it diverges. And ultimately, it allows you to share your authentic self with the world, which in turn can inspire others to embrace their own uniqueness too.
Okay, we've covered the definitions, the unexpected strengths, the really practical lessons. That let's make this really concrete. Let's hear that real-world story you mentioned, one that really shows this journey from outsider to finding strength.
Yeah, this is a really powerful one. It comes from a listener, username electronically339, who shared their story of being a true black sheep and how it led to this incredible turnaround.
Okay, tell us about it.
Well, their early life was really tough, extreme poverty, difficult circumstances. They were actually kicked out and forbidden from attending school when they were just 13 because of gang involvement.
Wow, 13. That's young.
Yeah, so undeniably on a path that was way off the conventional track from the very beginning.
Right.
They had a period of positive change later in California, but then ended up back in Texas and unfortunately slipped back into old patterns, got really deep in it, as they put it, selling illegal substances. And they described this feeling of becoming the evil that I despised. Making money, yes, but with this huge internal conflict and feeling totally disconnected from their family.
That sounds incredibly painful.
Oh.
And then something major happened. A turning point.
A devastating one. Their best friend and partner was tragically killed.
Oh, no.
And then later on, there was an FBI raid. They were facing a first-degree felony charge, which they point out was even higher than a murder charge in potential sentencing, carrying 25 to life in prison.
Good grief. That's rock bottom.
Absolutely. They described losing everything again and just having this stark realization that old saying in the streets, you either end up dead or in jail, rings true.
Yeah. So how did they turn it around from that?
That absolute low point became the catalyst. It forced the change. They made a promise right then and there to turn their life around.
Okay.
And they started literally from scratch, just a $300 laptop. But here's the key. They leveraged skills they'd picked up along the way, even during the difficult times.
Like,
Skills they'd acquired from learning WordPress, web development, SEO, Google AdWords campaigns, things they'd learned doing side hustles.
so even in the darkness, they were gathering tools.
Exactly. And they made a conscious choice. They said they put my pride to the side and took on deals I didn't think I was capable of doing. I did it. I learned on the job.
Wow. So really applying that lesson of just doing the work, learning as you go, even when it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely, just grinding it out. And the result, it was completely transformative. They eventually made more money legally than I did illegally.
That's incredible.
And crucially, no longer had to look over my shoulder. Today, Electronically 3D39 owns one of the largest marketing agencies in Texas and is also a successful artist with many million views.
What a story. From kicked out of school at 13, facing life in prison, to that love of success, that serious resilience. It really shows how that isolation, that outsider status, can force you to build an incredibly strong inner world, doesn't it?
It really does. That becomes your ultimate source of strength, maybe even more than any external success.
So looking back, what were the key lessons Electronically G339 wanted to share? What did they emphasize from that whole journey?
Well, number one was the sheer power of belief. They said, believe in yourself and how your mind is the center of your universe. Really internalizing that.
Mm-hmm.
They also stressed that energy is real, do good things from a pure place, and always appreciate yourself. And a big one was learning that money isn't everything. It can't take away depression or sadness.
Right. The material wealth didn't fix the internal stuff.
Exactly. Realizing that the simple things, a walk at the park or a breath of fresh air, are actually priceless. So the big message was, protect your mental health, and also daydream, visualize your future as this is what manifestation is all about. But crucially, paired with action, don't do bad things, lol.
Good advice.
Yeah. There are no shortcuts in life, and everything that happens to you, I believe, is happening for a reason, to learn. That was their big takeaway, learning from everything.
It's such a powerful testament, finding strength, finding purpose, finding success because of the unique, difficult journey, not in spite of it. From outcast to, well, visionary.
Precisely.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive, I think it really shows us that the black sheep label, it's not just about being an outcast. It's often about being a catalyst.
A catalyst for change, a source of real innovation, and just a powerful, powerful example of human resilience.
Yeah. And that journey, embracing your uniqueness, I mean, clearly it's challenging, no doubt about it.
Definitely not easy.
But it seems like it ultimately leads to this profound self-acceptance, this confidence, and this ability to bring something truly unique to the table, something that benefits everyone, not just the individual.
Absolutely. It enriches families, organizations, society as a whole when those unique perspectives are allowed to flourish.
So thinking about you listening right now, what does this all mean for you? Maybe you've felt like a black sheep yourself at some point, or maybe you still do.
Yeah.
Maybe you've had ideas that felt too radical where you were, or you felt pulled down a path that just seemed totally against the grain compared to everyone else.
Maybe consider this, that unique perspective you have, that unconventional way you think, that little bit of nonconformity. Those things you might see as weaknesses or reasons you don't fit in, they might actually be your greatest strength, just waiting for you to fully own them, embrace them, and share them.
So here's a final thought to chew on, your provocative thought for today. What part of your inner black sheep, that unique, maybe slightly unconventional part of you, are you ready to stop hiding? What part are you ready to maybe even start celebrating, knowing that it might be the very thing that helps not just you, but others around you truly thrive?